sure anybody in any country would recognize that their country had things happen that were darker periods in their history, some of them horribly dark. And it obviously depends on the country, how long it's been around, who ruled or led that country, and various other things. But the point is just pretty much every country was that way. That's why I wanted to talk about the subject of American warts on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host, I'm Kurt, and today is Wednesday, the 11th of August of 2021. Welcome to everyone who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, or on YouTube. And again, the subject for today is American warts. Allow me to go ahead and go through my notes really quickly. Yes, it is true. There have been ugly events in the history of the United States. No, they haven't all been addressed. That said, this country is one in which people are more likely to consider and talk about such things than many other places on the planet. Put simply, most Americans I know are not afraid to discuss our warts. It's true, most of us would rather discuss the amazing things done here. Even so, pretty much everybody not only recognizes room for improvement, but strives toward it. As with any other place, there will always be people and things that need dealt with. That said, ask just about anybody who was among the persecuted classes in another country. They'll very likely tell you the U.S. is so much better than my homeland. All of this considered, we can never forget we need to be vigilant and constantly work to improve or even remove those American warts. And that's what we want to talk about, what I want to discuss today. As I say, look, pretty much every country in the world has times in its history that the people in that country are not proud of. You look at Germany. Germany, who today seems to be a relatively nice place to be, and probably largely before World War I was so as well, during the periods of World War I and World War II, which were frankly quite close together, was a place in which people did things folks ought not to have done. And it literally resulted in mass deaths, among others, for the Jews and the Russians. Okay? Literally, there were millions of deaths among these two people groups as a result of what Germany did. Now, I'm not trying to use this as some sort of an excuse to not talk about what ugly things have happened in the United States. And further, I'm not trying to say that makes what happened in the United States not as big a deal. We had, as I have said many times, slavery in the United States, and anybody looking at that knows that's wrong. We weren't alone in that. And again, that's not an excuse. It's just a sign of where things were for a longer period of time. We weren't alone in that. Lots of countries had slavery. And by the way, that includes African countries, that includes Middle Eastern countries, that includes Asian countries, that includes European countries. And of course, it happened here in the Americas, and both in South and Central America and in the United States. This is just reality, and you need to know it's true. So, but again, none of this excuses the fact that when the U.S. was born as a country, there was slavery in the country that, granted, was there from before it actually was a country. Nonetheless, it was still there, and we were still dealing with it. Okay? And it took a lot of work. It took a lot of people talking about its abolishment. It took a bunch of people fighting a civil war, quote, civil war in the United States. It took a number of people helping people who were slaves to get away from their slavery. And I'll be honest with you, I think that there are still vestiges in some senses of slavery in the United States to this very day. They're not direct. They're not things that you go, oh yeah, it's pretty obvious that that's a result of slavery. But there are certain things, and some of them are attitudes, and particularly among certain individuals here in the United States. But the point I'm making is this. I'm not afraid to talk about that, and I'm not afraid to tell you it's wrong, and I'm not afraid to tell you we need to make sure that any sign or symptom of that in this country ultimately goes away. They must all go away. They must all go the way of the dinosaur. That's how that needs to work. If we refuse to deal with our past, then what we will do in all likelihood, and particularly at some point in the future, is repeat it. And remembering it's not enough. You actually have to be active. Slavery can't be considered a good thing wherever it happens in the world. Human trafficking cannot be considered a good thing wherever it happens in the world. High rates of death, particularly among certain people groups, is not something that should be considered an acceptable thing. I'm not trying to make any of those acceptable, and I'm not trying to tell you that we shouldn't talk about them. I will say that I think there's a great deal of benefit in the idea of holding up the things in the United States, for example, that are beneficial. That's true for the rest of the world. That's why I say, for example. Point here is that even if we spend our time mostly holding up the wonderful things about the United States, what we should never, never, never do is try to make it so that the black marks don't show up in the history books. They should show up in the history books. And I'm here to tell you, I think To Kill a Mockingbird and Mark Twain, various things that he wrote, Samuel Clemens, many of the things that he wrote, these need to be in libraries so people can see how people thought and talked, not to make it correct. In fact, we need to make it quite plain that those things are anything but correct. But they need to be in libraries. Those TV shows, Gone with the Wind or whatever, they need to be on television or on streaming services or whatever, so that people can see what others did and thought in past. This is the way you show people. And then from there, what you do is you say, and by the way, see how these people acted? When I was in Louisiana as a young man, I had a neighbor, and my neighbor was Southern to the core. This was Southern Louisiana, and he was a Southerner, Slidell, Louisiana. And I told him I was going to Australia, and he said there are, and we'll use the term black people. I promise you that's not the term he used. In Australia, right? And first of all, I didn't know. I was 7, 8 years old. I didn't know. 6, 7, 8 years old. I didn't know. So first of all, I couldn't have even told you that what he said was true. But that having been said, the way he said it startled me, and I carry the remembrance of that to this day. It's not something you want to hear people say. That N-word that a lot of people use. That's not something that you want, or not a lot of people, that these days a few people use. But back then, a whole lot more, and a whole lot more respectable people used that word, quote, respectable people. And they thought it was perfectly fine to use that word. And I'm here to tell you that that was a thing that shaped me and made it possible for me to understand that there were people who used that word in bad ways. Now, again, this was 1971, maybe somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't remember exactly, but somewhere in the early 70s. So it's been a long time ago, but that doesn't mean that there aren't people out there still with that mindset and that way of doing things and looking at business. That being said, I think you're going to find the majority of people in the United States do not support a lot of the sort of darker periods in the United States. When the stock market crashed, most people don't support what happened there and how it was taken care of. Now, we have differences in what we believe caused it and how we believe it can be kept from happening again. But all of that being said, we don't support those things. We certainly, of all things, don't support ideas like slavery. I want it to be made very clear that the majority of Americans are against such things, do not support them at all. And we're not going to forget that they happened, and we're not going to stop working towards a more reasonable society where equality can be had and where people are judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said it, one of the better things I think he said. I want you to understand, though, Americans mostly are not afraid to look at our warts. We just prefer to look at the good times. That doesn't mean we don't recognize the existence of the warts. We just don't talk about them as much because we want to emphasize the positive, accentuate the positive. We don't want to accentuate the negative. Not to say that we don't realize it existed, not to say that we don't realize there are still problems there, but that's where we are. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up now. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I'm Kurt. Today is Wednesday, the 11th of August of 2021. Tomorrow will be Thursday, the 12th of August of 2021. Thank you to everyone who's been here on Rumble on the podcast and on YouTube. Remember, Rumble is my preferred platform. Rumble is my preferred platform You can give me a positive rumble on Rumble or a negative one if you feel the need to do that. You can also give me a like or a dislike, thumbs up or thumbs down on YouTube, and you can comment on either platform. Our subject today has been American warts. I trust you understand that we have them. Tomorrow we're going to talk about reactions matter, and this is with regard to something that I heard about the way an autistic individual was treated, and I really want to applaud the people who did it, but I'll go ahead and cover that in tomorrow's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics, and hopefully we will see you when I do that edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This video was recorded on Wednesday, the 11th of August of 2021. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that, and you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.